Something is happening on this continent, and the world's most powerful nations are moving fast. Not for oil, not for gold, for something far more valuable. Water, the most valuable resource on Earth. The Congo Basin holds 30% of Africa's entire surface water. The Pentagon has classified it a strategic reserve. The question is, why now? And why are 5 global powers racing to control it? By 2040, 4 billion people will face acute water scarcity, global scramble for resources. Africa sits on 9% of the world's fresh water. The scramble has already begun. Most of the world just doesn't know it yet. China has invested over $60 billion in African water infrastructure. They call it development aid. Drone rising over the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Its colossal wall holding back a sea of blue water. Control the water, control the continent. Egypt has stated it openly. Any threat to the Nile is an act of war. Yet the dam is nearly full, and downstream the world watches. The first water war of the 21st century may already be in motion. Below Africa's surface lie the world's largest untapped aquifers. The Nubian sandstone aquifer alone holds 150,000 cubic kilometers of water. Survey teams from 11 countries are already mapping it. Close-up of drilling equipment boring into the earth near an African aquifer site. Soil samples rising from depth. The Sahel loses 240,000 square kilometers of arable land every year. Over 6 million people have been displaced by drought in this decade alone. Aid agencies call it a humanitarian crisis. Intelligence agencies call it a strategic opportunity. Russia's African strategy has quietly pivoted from military to hydrological. 7 new water infrastructure deals were signed in the last 18 months. No press conferences, no headlines, just quietly signed documents and boots on the ground. Water rights concessions are being buried inside infrastructure deals. Debt-trap diplomacy gives creditors leverage over sovereign resources. By the time a nation defaults on a loan, the collateral is the water. And the water is already gone. India's land and water acquisition model in East Africa mirrors what China began a decade ago. Buy the land, build the irrigation, control the output. The African farmer becomes a laborer on his own soil, and the water table drops silently every season. In some regions of the Sahel, water costs 20 times more than oil. Global commodity traders have noticed. Water futures are now traded on Wall Street. Africa's rivers are being priced before Africans have a seat in the exchange. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam sits at a geopolitical fault line. It feeds Ethiopia, it threatens Egypt, it excites China. Every cubic meter of water held back is a calculation of power. And the math is never in Africa's favor. The world's largest known fossil water system lies beneath 4 African nations. Libya already built a pipeline to extract it, at enormous cost. But the water is non-renewable, ancient, finite. Once it's gone, it is gone forever. The proposed Grand Inga Dam would be the largest power project in human history. It would generate more electricity than 40 nuclear power plants. The beneficiaries? Europe, the Middle East, not the Congo Basin. The water is African, the profits are not. Mining companies extract billions of liters of African groundwater annually with near zero oversight. Mining companies extract billions of liters of African groundwater annually with near zero oversight. The water goes into copper and cobalt production. The communities downstream get nothing. Slow establishing drone shot over Morocco's Atlantic coast. Green farmland giving way to the Sahara just 200 kilometers inland. Saudi Arabia is funding desalination projects along Africa's Atlantic coast. The technology transfers the water, but the ownership stays foreign. North Africa's water future is being written in Riyadh. France retains legal water access rights in 11 of its former African colonies. These colonial contracts, never formally terminated, are now being enforced. Lawyers in Paris are billing for water that falls as rain on African soil. The post-colonial era never ended, it just changed its language. Even Africa's most spectacular water resources generate wealth that flows outward. Tourism, hydropower, bottled water exports. The continent is the source, but not the beneficiary. This is the structure of modern extraction, invisible, legal, total. The Rift Valley is East Africa's water engine, ancient, irreplaceable, under siege. Geothermal extraction is accelerating aquifer depletion. Flamingo populations have crashed 70% in 2 decades. The ecosystem's collapse is a preview of what's coming for millions of humans. Ethiopia is building the future, on borrowed time and borrowed money. International lenders fund the infrastructure. International operators run it from glass towers. When the debt matures, who owns the water? Egypt's Nile Delta is sinking. Salt water is invading from the north, less water from the south. 100 million people depend on a river being contested from both ends. The civilization that built the pyramids may run dry within a generation. In the Sahara, water is life, and militaries know exactly where every drop is. French forces in the Sahel have mapped every oasis, well, and aquifer. They say it's for counter-terrorism operations. But the maps are color-coded by strategic value, not threat level. South Sudan's oil is being extracted through its water. The Sud, one of Earth's great freshwater wetlands, is being contaminated. International oil companies are operating under South Sudanese licenses. The UN has documented the damage. No one has stopped it. Lake Chad has shrunk by 90% since 1963. Droughts, climate change, upstream diversion, over-irrigation, the same desperation that empties a lake fills an extremist movement. Water scarcity and terrorism share the same map. Egypt's Aswan Dam was built to control the Nile. Now Ethiopia's dam threatens to control Aswan. The hotline between the two capitals has gone silent. When diplomacy fails over water, what comes next? Sudan's civil war is a water war in disguise. The Nile runs through the conflict, it is the conflict. Whoever controls the pumping stations controls survival. The battle lines follow the river. South Africa's water crisis is a system designed to fail certain people. Johannesburg's wealthy suburbs pay for pressured water delivered to their gardens. Townships queue for hours for a few liters. Inequality in water is inequality in survival. Madagascar was almost sold wholesale in 2009. A South Korean company negotiated a lease for half the island's arable land and its water. Public outrage toppled the government before the deal closed. The next negotiation will be quieter. Turkey's water strategy extends beyond the Middle East. African freshwater access now supports Turkish military positioning on the continent. Water is no longer just a resource, it is a weapon system. And Turkey is playing the long game. The Niger Delta was once the water capital of West Africa. Now it is a sacrifice zone. Decades of oil extraction have poisoned the groundwater for millions. The companies responsible are still operating, still profitable. In Botswana, the world's richest diamond mine sits above water the Bushmen have used for 30,000 years. The court sided with the mine. The Bushmen were removed from their ancestral lands. Ancient water rights erased in a single legal judgment. The Kariba Dam generates enough power for 2 nations. The people living in its shadow still burn candles. The water runs through turbines that power foreign-owned mines. Infrastructure that serves extraction, not people. The Atlas Mountains are North Africa's water tower. As the snowpack retreats, so does the water supply for 50 million people. European water companies are already negotiating Moroccan aquifer access. By the time the snow is gone, the water rights will already be signed. The Limpopo River is shared by 4 nations and governed by none of them effectively. Upstream diversion, downstream drought, no binding agreement. International bodies produce reports, governments produce nothing, and the river runs thinner every year. The entire world is meeting to discuss Africa's water. Africa is not always in the room. Part 1 has shown you the architecture of the crisis. In Part 2, we go deeper into who profits and who pays. The crisis is no longer theoretical. Rivers across the continent are dying in real time. The source of the contamination is rarely prosecuted. The communities downstream have no recourse. Lake Turkana, Kenya's largest lake, is dying because of dams in Ethiopia. 300,000 Kenyans depend on the lake for protein. The Omo River used to flood the lake every year. It no longer does. One nation's development is another's starvation. The UN called Darfur the first climate war in 2007. 300,000 people killed, over 2 million displaced. The weapon was not only machetes and guns, it was drought. Water scarcity was the trigger. Violence was the bullet. Every major drought in the Lake Chad Basin has been followed by an insurgency surge. The correlation is not coincidental, it is causational. Men with no water and no future make different choices. The jihadists are not the cause of Lake Chad's crisis, they are its product. Water was used as a weapon in the Tigray War. Federal forces cut supply lines to hospitals and communities. The UN called it a potential war crime. The war continued. Water weaponization is now a standard tactic in African conflict. Al-Shabaab doesn't just bomb markets, it taxes water. Controlling rivers means controlling revenue and controlling people. The insurgency's most reliable income stream is not foreign donors. The insurgency's most reliable income stream is not foreign donors, it's thirst. Mozambique's gas is worth $60 billion. The communities displaced to reach it numbered 800,000. Their water access rights were not part of the resettlement package. The gas burns in Europe, the people walk to find water. In eastern DRC, there are 22 armed groups. All of them understand one thing: water is leverage. Control a river crossing, tax everything that crosses. Control a mine's water supply, control the mine. Mali's military junta expelled French forces and invited Russia. One of the first things Russian advisors reviewed: French water utility contracts. The junta framed it as sovereignty. Russia framed it as solidarity. Both understood that whoever controls the water utility controls the capital. Niger's junta suspended every foreign resource extraction license. Not just uranium, not just oil. Water extraction licenses suspended. The continent's new military governments are learning water sovereignty is political power. Guinea sits above the headwaters of West Africa's 3 greatest rivers. Russia and China both want to build its dams. The strategic calculation is identical: build the infrastructure and write the water agreements. Guinea's military government is accepting bids. In the Central African Republic, Wagner forces have secured one thing above all else: river crossings. Control the crossings, control all movement. Movement of goods, of people, of power. Water geography is military geography. South Sudan's civil conflicts orbit water points. Cattle are wealth. Water sustains cattle. Killing to reach water is survival. 78% of all violent incidents in South Sudan in 2023 were within 5 kilometers of a water source. Ancient pastoral wars are now fought with modern weapons for ancient water. Ethiopia and Sudan have been on the edge of conflict for 3 years. The formal dispute is about farmland. The real dispute is about water. The Nile's tributaries are the lines being fought over, even if no one calls it a water war. Egypt has a military plan to destroy the Ethiopian dam. It exists. Intelligence agencies have confirmed it. The trigger: a measurable reduction in Nile flow. The first water war may begin not with a declaration, but with an airstrike. The U.S. Fifth Fleet is positioned 400 kilometers from the Ethiopian dam. The classified annex on Ethiopia is real. American planners know if Egypt strikes, the entire Nile Basin destabilizes. And American interests are everywhere in that instability. Zimbabwe's water system is collapsing. Chinese financing is rebuilding it, on terms that transfer operational control. Article 14 of the Dam Agreement grants Chinese operators the right to manage water allocation decisions. The water is Zimbabwean, the decisions are not, and possibly one of its largest oil reserves. The indigenous communities who depend on that water found out from a Twitter post. It has never been fully implemented. The peace is a water argument that hasn't turned violent yet. The Galamsey miners are poor Ghanaians, but their Chinese backers are not. The water crisis is not always foreign. Sometimes it is internal. Cape Verde, an island with almost no fresh water, built the continent's most efficient water system. Renewable energy, desalination, community management, zero foreign debt. It proves what Africa can do when it controls its own solutions. African engineers, African management, African funding prioritization. No debt trap, no concession agreement, no foreign operational control. Rwanda is not waiting to be developed, it is developing itself. It is not just infrastructure, it is a declaration. Egypt and Sudan have not. The two nations that use 90% of the Nile's water refuse to share governance with the 9 nations where it originates. This is the central contradiction and the powder keg of African water politics. Africa's water conflicts are increasingly being fought in international courts. The ICJ is the venue for water law's most consequential arguments. But courts move slowly. Rivers do not wait for judgments. By the time a ruling comes, the water may already be gone. 400 million Africans, no clean water. In the continent that holds the most water on Earth, the distribution failure is not natural, it is engineered. Engineered by exploitation, debt, corruption, and neglect, in that order. The solution is already being built in Kibera. Women with science degrees and no corporate backing. A water cooperative that outperforms the municipal system it was designed to supplement. The innovation is not in a Silicon Valley lab, it is here. The rains still come, for now. But the Intertropical Convergence Zone, the rain engine of the Sahel, is moving. 3 kilometers south every year. In 30 years, the rain that today falls on Niger, it will fall on Nigeria, and Niger will have none. Africa doesn't just face drought, it faces flood. The same climate system that withholds water for 8 months dumps it catastrophically in the other 4. Extreme drought, extreme flood, no infrastructure built for either. The water crisis is not scarcity alone, it is chaos. The Great Green Wall is the most ambitious restoration project in human history. 18 million hectares reclaimed from the Sahara. Built by Africans for Africa, using African traditional knowledge, The wall does not just hold back sand, it holds back water. UNDP data is clear: when communities manage their own water, outcomes improve. Lower prices, higher access, better maintenance. Every metric improves when Africans run African water. Every metric improves when Africans run African water. The African Union has passed the declaration: every drop of fresh water on this continent is a sovereign resource. Not a commodity, not collateral, not a concession. The words are written. In Part 4, we ask, will they hold? The fire beneath these rivers has been burning for centuries. But so is something else. A knowledge, a claim, a refusal to accept that the water is not theirs. In Part 4, the reckoning arrives. This is the moment the story has been building toward. 54 African nations, one position, one vote. The rivers that made this continent may decide its future. And the world is finally paying attention. The African Union has sent the message to Beijing. Every water concession signed under the Belt and Road Initiative is under review. China built the infrastructure. Africa is reclaiming the terms. This is not aggression, it is sovereignty in motion. France is facing demands it did not expect from a continent it assumed would comply. 14 billion in water contract revenues are now under legal challenge. The protests are not symbolic. They are the opening argument of a renegotiation that will define the post-colonial era. Washington has received the memo. African water sovereignty is now a classified U.S. strategic concern. Not because Washington cares about African communities. African water sovereignty is now a classified U.S. strategic concern. The sovereign model is not theoretical. It is being built, commissioned, and operated today. Every African-owned water infrastructure project is a statement of independence. And the infrastructure is multiplying. Egypt, Ethiopia, and the Nile Basin nations are talking again. The language of international water law is replacing the language of ultimatums. It is slow, it is imperfect, it may fail. But the fact they are talking is the first victory. The Democratic Republic of Congo has voted. The Congo River belongs to the Congolese people. Every foreign water extraction license must now be renegotiated under Congolese law. The largest river in Africa finally has a legal guardian. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is producing. Not just power, food security. 4 million Ethiopians are eating because of water their government controlled. This is what water sovereignty looks like in practice. South Africa just discovered it has 4 times more water than it thought. Beneath the townships, beneath the rural areas, beneath the communities told there was nothing. The water was always there. The census just chose finally to look. The Okavango Delta now has a protection protocol. 3 nations agreed. The African Development Bank enforces it financially. No foreign corporate interest, no European legal framework. An African solution for Africa's most precious water. Kenya and Ethiopia signed the Omo Turkana Protocol. For the first time, a downstream nation has legal rights to upstream water management. Slowly, but the direction has changed. The Great Green Wall is working. Water tables rising 40% where trees have been replanted. The wall is not just ecological, it is hydrological. Morocco has rewritten its water law. No privatization without a national referendum. No concession without community consent. The colonial water contracts cannot be renewed under this code. Ghana took back its dam. The numbers are moving in the right direction. The lights came on in villages that sat in darkness for 60 years beside a hydroelectric river. 4 million Ethiopians are eating because of water their government controlled. The rivers that made this continent may decide its future. They are the opening argument of a renegotiation that will define the post-colonial era. The protests are not symbolic. A Canadian company's drilling licenses suspended. Sovereignty is not rhetorical, it is measured in lit homes. Lake Chad is showing signs of life. Because losing Africa's water to China is a geopolitical defeat. When you need less of the river dispute softens. Mangroves replanted, rivers recovering, water quality rising. The water is still there. African capital is solving African problems, at profit. 54 African nations, one position, one vote. And children reading after dark. Not as symbolism, as hydrology. Prices set in Maputo, not Paris. Forests produce rain. They hold water in the soil. 22% return, 12 million people served. And the infrastructure is multiplying. When the extraction stops, nature returns slowly, but it returns. The Niger Delta is healing. Planted by hand, maintained by community. The African Blue Economy Charter covers water from ocean to aquifer. The lights came on in villages that sat in darkness for 60 years beside a hydroelectric river. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is producing. The Niger Delta is healing. The world is listening, finally. No concession without community consent. The water is still there. The largest river in Africa finally has a legal guardian. The colonial water contracts cannot be renewed under this code. Not just those who were powerful enough to claim it first. The water is not a stock, it is a right. 195 nations representatives voted yes. The act is passed. The enforcement begins now. Wall Street's water futures trading just hit a legal wall. The water is not a stock, it is a right. The Kafue is coming back. Fish are returning, families are returning to the river. What took a century of mining to destroy is recovering in years. Nature's resilience is remarkable when given the chance to express it. The Dakar Declaration is signed. 54 nations, one document, one declaration. Africa's water, what will be governed by Africans for Africans under African law. This is the declaration. Now comes the defense of it. 30 years of resistance ended. 30 years of resistance ended. The Nile now belongs to all who depend on it. The Grand Inga Dam, the most powerful energy project in human history, is being built by Congolese engineers with Congolese money under Congolese governance. When complete, it will power half a continent, and the power will belong to Africa. And the power will belong to Africa. The Great Green Wall is visible from space. 250 million tons of carbon captured, 10 million people with restored water. 250 million tons of carbon captured, 10 million people with restored water, planted by hand, maintained by community. This wall was built without foreign debt, corporate ownership, or extractive interest. This wall was built without foreign debt, corporate ownership, or extractive interest. Not fast enough, not completely. Not fast enough, not completely. But the trajectory is sovereign. But the trajectory is sovereign. And sovereignty, once established, does not easily yield. And sovereignty, once established, does not easily yield. Not with charity, not with solidarity. Not with charity, not with solidarity. With the recognition that power has shifted. With the recognition that power has shifted, Africa is no longer asking for its water, it is governing it. The hidden reason global powers are securing Africa's freshwater reserves is the same reason Africa must secure it first. The hidden reason global powers are securing Africa's freshwater reserves is the same reason Africa must secure it first. Because water is not just life. Because water is not just life. It is power, it is sovereignty, it is the next century. It is power, it is sovereignty, it is the next century. Africa knows this now. The rest of the world is learning. Africa knows this now. The rest of the world is learning.
Global powers are moving fast, not for oil, for water. Not for oil and for water. Global powers are moving fast. The Congo holds massive water reserves. Now it's labeled a strategic asset. The Congo holds massive water reserves. Now it's labeled a strategic asset. Water is disappearing, and conflict is following behind it. And conflict is following behind it. One river, multiple nations ready for war. Multiple nations ready for war. Beneath the surface lies hidden wealth, and the race to claim it has begun. And the race to claim it has begun. In some places, water costs more than oil, and someone is making profit from it. And someone is making profit from it. A lake has completely vanished from the map. This war isn't just about power. This war isn't just about power. And the system is designed that way. And the system is designed that way. They knew the danger, and they let it happen. And they let it happen. When crisis hit, the rich drilled wells, the poor waited in line. When crisis hit, the rich drilled wells, the poor waited in line, and time is running out. And time is running out. Hidden water, hidden battles. The richest water country on Earth can't provide safe water to its own people. Three nations now stand at a critical crossroads. Armies aren't just guarding land, they're guarding water. The people were pushed out, clean energy for the world, water loss for local communities. The world is planning Africa's water future. The world is planning Africa's water future. But Africa isn't always in the room.